Hey everyone, Jake Newton, COO of Center for Personal Protection and Safety. And it's not often that you get the opportunity to have conversations with people that have had real world security and safety experiences and, get to tell their story on the outside of what they went through. And especially when it's a success story, it's really great to have these conversations and capture the perspective and the experience they went through. Also, we as a collective security industry and individuals in the space can have this conversation, but also use those lessons learned to make it better for those that have similar things happen in the future, or maybe even prevent these things from happening to begin with. I'm joined by Pat Ellis. Pat's a dear friend of mine, and we're going to get into his story. And Pat was over in Isreal several months ago when that conflict began between Israel and Hamas. And so we want to dive into that and have a conversation in terms of what he experienced and what that means for everybody else in terms of what you can do about it. So thanks for coming, Pat.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me down.
Yeah. So would love to hear, just for the audience and for everybody joining, tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your background.
I grew up over on the west side of the state at a big dairy farm, and ended up going to work for the fire department over there, and then went to the dark side and joined the police department after a couple of years. And so I started learning a lot of things about self-awareness and that. But before that, when I was 18 years old, that's been a while, I went to work for Western Airlines, of all things, back in those days. And I got the travel bug. We were able to travel with my wife. I got married. She was 19, I was 20. So we'd get passes and be able to go places. And I thought back to when we went to Jamaica. We just decided we were going to go. We got a pass, got on the airplane and went, and realized we hadn't even made a hotel reservation. And that's when I think originally started getting some self-awareness, because we got a little Jeep ride into downtown, and there's guys walking around all over with machetes. And I thought, oh, this doesn't look too good. And so we hooked up with a couple other guys that turned out to be airline pilots that we'd met. And they kind of shepherded us around because we were still pretty naive about that, and told us some things. So we got a hotel and that. But that started my awareness of we need to be careful some of the places that we go. And so we started traveling a lot. We went to the Philippines. We went all over the place. Then I went to work for the fire department, changed a little bit, switched over to the PD, and really started to learn about things about self-awareness then. So we would save all of our money like crazy and then blow it on a big trip, go someplace. And that's when we actually got started doing that.
So it sounds like you've been kind of all over the world, and I know you have a little bit knowing you personally, but yeah. Tell us a little bit, how many countries have you been to, and where have you traveled to?
I've thought about that coming down, about the 7 continents, and I was trying to remember all of them, but I think I'm still missing 2. And we've had the opportunity to be able to hunt and fish all over the world. And so it's been really good. We've been able to do that. When we were going on one trip, in fact, the last one that we went to where we ended up in Isreal, it was not a hunting trip, and we were just going to be tourists. And my son-in-law asked me if something was wrong. Are you all right? You're not going to go hunting somewhere? And I said, no, this is going to kill me, but no, we're just being tourists. So that's what we ended up doing.
That's awesome. So having that background in law enforcement, has safety and security always been a priority of yours, or based upon maybe your travels around the globe, did it kind of materialize over time? How important has your security and safety been for you and as well as your spouse?
Once I was working for the police department, I became very much more aware of the importance of being self-awareness. I think about some of the places that we went before I started to think about that, and how I was literally oblivious, and how we got into places that were probably not safe, and how we got back out of those. And even having that self-awareness, you can find yourself into some tight spots. We were in France trying to find our way to the Louvre, and I was following the app on my phone, which is really a mistake in some places, because it took us way, way out of the way. And we ended up in this spot that it just seemed kind of funny, but not too bad. We stopped and bought some croissants and had coffee at this little shop on the sidewalk. But there wasn't, the people were just a little bit different there. So I called up an Uber car or a Lyft to find it because we were tired of walking, trying to find the place. And nobody would pick us up. They would come to a certain spot on the map and stop. And then stop. Nope, no pickup. And it happened twice. And I thought, well, that's weird. So we started to walk to where that was at and finally got a Lyft car to pick us up. And I asked the guy, hey, nobody would pick us up, but here's where we were. And he goes, oh my God, man, no one will go there. And he said, you were there? I said, yeah, it seemed to be okay. But it was a really bad part of Paris that you didn't want to go to, but we didn't realize it.
Wow. So it sounds like being unfamiliar with the location was kind of one aspect of not having an indication of, what could perhaps go wrong in some circumstances. You mentioned, being oblivious to other things as well. It sounded like, what were some of those things that you've kind of learned over time that you are now aware of and you now know what to look for, but historically maybe weren't so inclined to be mindful of?
Certain crowds, and we are very, very cautious how we carry our documents and our money now. We've got zippered pant pockets, like a belt under our shirt, something so that anything in your back belongs to somebody else. Anything in your front is a good chance it'll stay yours. So, and I still see people walking around with their cell phones sticking out of their back pocket. It drives me crazy. I want to tell them, look, you're going to lose your phone, but I don't, or just things like that. So, but certain types of crowds, and you don't want to profile, but you can't help it in safety situations when you're in some part of the city that starts to look a lot of graffiti, different types of graffiti, and the way that people dress. It's just different in different parts in the world. Mm-hmm. You can't help but see them and think, this is a sketchy place.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I love what you said in terms of, not profiling and not, basically looking at, because the way things look doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be an issue there.
I've seen some people that I thought, oh boy, that turned out in Barbados was one. This guy approached us in Barbados and said, hey, you guys are from the US. I said, yeah. He says, can I show you around? And I thought, uh-oh. And I thought, because he looked pretty sketchy, great big dude, and missing some teeth and just kind of funny. Turned out to be the coolest guy ever. Showed us around some really cool places and did not try to get any money from us. Whereas in China, a guy did the same thing and he was dressed nice, told us he was a student and everything. We ended up in a little studio where they put the super pressure on you to buy something. And then all of a sudden he was gone. Where'd that dude go? Well, he's out getting somebody else to come in. Mm-hmm. And so it's really tough.
It is hard to tell. Yeah. I've been to Turkey before, and similar kind of thing. We were walking up and down the streets, and nicest people you'd ever meet, but everybody wants to sell you something, and that's why,
Exactly.
So you just never know.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So you've been all over the world. You've got all kinds of travel experiences, and based upon those things that you've learned, it sounds like I imagine those probably really impacted this time in Israel.
Oh, huge. When we started traveling, we started going to a convention every year called Safari Club International. And it's a large hunting conservation type organization. And we would buy a lot of our trips there. They have an auction that supports the organization, and we'd buy trips on the auction. And then other times we would just interview different outfitters for places that we wanted to go to, and then end up going with those guys. But when we were there, I noticed that there was a travel insurance company called MedJet that would evacuate you if you got sick, hit by a truck, but you had to be in the hospital before they would come and get you. And so then a few years later, we came across Global Rescue. And Global Rescue, if you're gored by a Cape Buffalo or you're hurt and you're in the bush of Africa, they will send somebody in the medical team or an airplane in to get you. You don't have to be in the hospital to be picked up. And I thought that was good in some respects if you got hurt out in the bush.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. If you're out in the bush, it's going to be really difficult to get to a hospital someplace or get medical help.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure as a sportsman, especially, if you're out there seeking different animals and those sorts of things, you're not necessarily close to a hospital.
No. No, we've gone into some places that were a long ways from any medical help. You'd ride in the back of a pickup for a full day, maybe, or longer to get into help.
Yeah. Well, let's start getting into this trip. So, you're over there. Sounds like the trip was cut short, but let's even back up a step. What led you to want to go there? What was the purpose of the trip? Sounded like you said earlier it was for tourism related.
Right. It was.
You wanted to go over there and just spend some leisure time. But from a safety and security perspective, was there anything leading up to the trip that you did to help yourself prepare ahead of time before you even left to the comfort of your own home?
We did. My wife went to Italy with our granddaughter and our daughter this year for 2 weeks. I went up near the Arctic Circle in Nunavut to hunt, and we went someplace else. I can't think where it was, but I got to thinking we're going to be going on, and we're taking a cruise. Now, we've never been on a cruise before, so we took a small 600-person boat, which I thought would be huge, and I thought, we'll be pretty safe on the cruise. But I thought, man, I'm going to look at a little bit more insurance from Global Rescue, because they have a section that you can buy the evacuation security part of it. And I was interested in that. And so it was an extra $1,000 for the year for the two of us. And it would cover our daughter and our granddaughter also. So if they got kidnapped, if there was a war started, which happened, they'll come and get you out of the area. So I decided we were going to go ahead and do that. And so we bought that for the whole year. You can buy it for individual trips or for the year. And I'm not sitting here doing an advertisement for Global Rescue, but I was so impressed with the way it all worked that I would recommend it for anybody. But so we had that, and I made sure that it was covered us on the cruise if anything happened. And so we went all through the Mediterranean for 2 weeks on the cruise, and it ended in Tel Aviv. So Sharon said, well, we're in Tel Aviv. Let's spend a few days in Israel. And we had already booked a 10-day trip to Israel with a group of 50 people from the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago that was going to take place in March, which would be just a couple months after we got back. So Sharon said, let's stay in Jerusalem for just a few days to see what it's like, so it'll prime us for our trip in March with Moody. So we booked 5 days in the old city in Jerusalem in a really neat old hotel. And so the cruise ended in Tel Aviv, and that's where we took off from there.
Wow, fascinating. So a lot of our clients are businesses, and we do a lot of training and instruction for organizations that have their travelers going overseas for whatever reason,
Right.
business purposes, and sometimes even leisure in association with business travel. And one of the things that we talk about when we train our travelers, and it's pretty common for organizations to be able to have some sort of mechanism like that in place, whether it is a travel assistance provider directly, some sort of insurance policy that's got that built into it, and many other support mechanisms. But based upon what you're saying, and this is kind of the step 2 of this, is you as the individual took that responsibility to make sure you have that, but also know how to use it should you have to unlock those resources. And that is so important, because you probably weren't expecting a war to break out while you're over there.
No.
But when it did occur, you knew exactly how you could unlock resources to help you when you were in need.
Right. And I didn't think of it as quickly as I probably should have, but things were happening so quickly. And the information coming out was so sparse because it was happening fast, and nobody knew really at that point what was going on. Backing up a little bit, when I got to the Spokane airport, I patted myself down to go through security and realized, where's my cell phone? It was home on my desk on the charger.
Oh, no.
Oh, so I thought, I'm not going to need my cell phone. Oh, boy. But I had my iPad, thank goodness, and my wife had her cell phone. So the first 3 days was really cell phone jitters. After that, it was 3 weeks of pure bliss. No cell phone until I really needed it.
That's amazing.
And I'll tell you about that in a second when I was talking to the guy from Global Rescue, because there's another aspect to that. I bought a satellite phone that I sent with my wife when she went to Africa on her trip. When she went to Italy, she carried that, and I've carried it to Africa. and I've carried it into Panama and up the Amazon. And I've had that tucked away. When I was interviewing, talking to the gentleman from Global Rescue that was helping us, he said, okay, so you've got your phone. And I said, no, it's at home. Oh my gosh. But you've got your satellite phone. I went, no, that's at home too. And I was really embarrassed because I'm always prepared. I've got all my stuff together on the trip. I've got the phone numbers I need. I know where the embassy is. And I can't remember whether you check in with the embassy, tell them where you're at. I've done that. And I didn't have any communication devices. And I thought, I sound like a rookie.
Yeah. Well, no, that's great because so there's several things that you touched on there that are also kind of part of that pre-trip process, right? You mentioned having redundancies built in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have your phone. We rely so much on our phone nowadays that, we lose that thing. It seems like our whole life slips away from our fingertips. But having that satellite phone, while you didn't necessarily have it in this case, you're thinking about those redundancies built in.
The ship.
Exactly.
It lulled me into a bit of a complacency. And you can't do that even on a cruise.
Yeah. Fascinating.
You can't do it.
It sounded like a moment ago, and I'd like to kind of briefly touch on more some of the pre-trip kind of preparation items. It sounded like you talked about the State Department and registering for their process called the STEP program.
Yes.
Safe Traveler Enrollment Program.
Forgot what that was.
So the first part of the question is, how beneficial was that? And then the second question is, was there anything else that you did to kind of identify what you were up against in terms of geopolitical concerns, maybe health-related concerns, any geographic concerns that you might be potentially bumping up against, different things that you looked into before you left?
We read about every place we go. If we're hunting, we research what we are hunting, and then we research where we're going. And Global Rescue also has a number that you can call, has resources that tell you about it. And so we'd always look at that. We look at that before we're going. That's what I was doing this morning, was on the computer looking at just things on New Zealand. Things are stable, but I'd like to know that before we go. So we checked out the countries. We went to Turkey, we went to Greece, and different places. So we had an idea of what was going on. I was a little bit sketchy about things in Turkey because things have been not too good, but they pretty well calmed down. So we felt good about that. I knew that Isreal is always on edge with different things. So we checked that out carefully, but we felt comfortable going to all these places this trip. In Egypt, they had an armed guard on every bus. Every tour, people would go down and get on a little wagon to a horse-pulled thing into town, and they had an armed guard with them. Everybody who was a tourist had an armed guard with them the entire time.
Is there any one thing, thinking from kind of a preparation perspective, and then we'll kind of get into while you're on site?
Yeah, you've got to keep me on track. I'll start telling you stories.
No, that's all right. I love it because this is such valuable information because everybody watching this has the opportunity to hear those little tidbits of things that you did and even things that you didn't do that maybe you do usually do, right?
Right.
And so having that checklist of every time I go, I need to make sure I get that sat phone if it's a place I can take with me.
Yep.
Having those kinds of things, so we're taking the brain out of it maybe a little bit and having these different resources in place. But was there any one thing that before you leave that's like, this is an absolute must, this is the number one thing I need to make sure I do before I go around on any trip around the world? What would you say that might be?
To make sure that your everything is up to date. Your personal will, your information, all your personal stuff. And my son knows the combination to everything that he needs to have. And we've made a list, and we update that list and leave it with them. And they know our itinerary. They know exactly where we're going to be. And that threw them when we got stuck in Isreal because we had limited communication with them at that point. But they are well aware of where we're going and what we're going to do. Oh, you asked me about the STEP program.
Yeah.
How that did.
Yeah.
I was glad I had that. And that was one thing that Global Rescue asked about, had we had that. I said, yes, we do. And that was good. We didn't use it. The embassy didn't try to contact us until we got home. They wanted to know whether we were out of the country. I had received an email that we were gone. And I responded, yes, we were back home.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's such a powerful program. It's one we advocate strongly because you've got the private sector side for, working with our clients, but then you also have the governmental side where every once in a while, they're able to unlock resources and, do certain things to help people in need. But at a very minimum, the State Department is able to provide information. If there's something that they're coming up across, they have the ability to warn citizens. One, they know you're in country. Two, they can provide you information relevant to you and they push it out and, you're at least knowledgeable about what's going on. It's very useful thing.
I was really big about self-privacy stuff and not sharing my information with the government, how that goes. But I discovered that that program is very important. When you're out of the country, you're out of the country, and the laws, everything is different than in the States. You're not covered and protected by the Constitution when you're gone. So I want to take advantage of what the government offers us in that STEP program in case something happens. So I know where the embassy is. I always know where the embassy is, where it's going to be and how far away it is from where we're going to be. Because that embassy that's where we are protected.
U.S. soil on a foreign land.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So powerful. Yeah. All of these different things that you go through they're so monumental in the success for when these kinds of things happen. As we're going to get into it in a minute, but all of these different kinds of things, when you're thinking about your trip ahead of time and you're getting ready to go overseas, you might travel around the world all the time, but these kinds of things you can't take for granted because you just don't know when something might happen that's going to totally derail your trip. And, the one time you need all of these resources in place and you want to make it happen now in the snap of a finger, well, having that in a memory bank that you can easily recall gets you at least a couple steps down the road a little bit faster. So let's get into the trip specifically.
Right.
So you go on this cruise.
The cruise, everything's great. We had a really, really nice time. And the only place was a little sketchy was in Egypt with those guys. But we felt like, he's armed with an MP5 under his jacket. So I'm thinking, well, I think we'll be okay if somebody tries to raid the bus or whatever. So then we get to Tel Aviv. And it seemed everything was great. Took the cab and there was, the reason I said it earlier that it took an hour and a half to get to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, there was a whole different story coming back to Tel Aviv on that cab. So we get to Jerusalem, checked into the hotel. It's an old hotel in the old city. We ate our way through the old market that afternoon, Friday afternoon.
And this is the conclusion of your cruise.
Yes, the cruise was done. We got off and there was a whole bunch of people waiting to get on. So they picked up a whole new group of people and departed on Friday evening. So they were out when things broke out.
Okay. How long did you have in Tel Aviv? Sounds like you were flying out of Tel Aviv.
We flew that's where we flew in and out of.
Okay.
Or we would have flown. Yes, we did fly out of Tel Aviv.
Okay.
Yeah. But the boat arrived in Tel Aviv and then we caught a cab within a couple hours.
Okay.
We didn't go to a hotel or anything in Tel Aviv. We went straight to Jerusalem.
Okay.
We only had 5 days in Jerusalem. We wanted to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Okay. So you did have some time in town.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were in Jerusalem. You ended up making your way to Tel Aviv. Kind of, what's the latest? Yeah. Walk us through that sequence of events of, things were okay. You're having some time. You're having some fun. Then things go south. The conflict starts erupting. What's that sequence of events looking like leading up to when the conflict happened? We
had such a good time Friday afternoon in the old market. Went back to the hotel. Spent the night, got up at 6:30 or 6. We're having breakfast in the hotel down below in the lower section at 6:30. The first air raid siren started to sound at 6:30. Nobody seemed concerned. I thought, probably a drill. Or I've heard that they get air raid sirens periodically anyway. And but I noticed that all the wait staff started looking at their phones and walked outside and were looking up in the sky and came back in and looked at their phones more. The sirens stopped. They started up again. And this one great big guy that was there started locking the doors and closing the windows and the doors and locking everything. And I thought, now that's kind of funny. Maybe they're just practicing doing a drill going on. But none of the other guests seemed the slightest bit concerned. So we finished up breakfast, went back to our room, talked about it. The sirens sounded again a couple times. And we had a walking tour booked for 11 o'clock that was going to tour us around. So I said, boy, I tell you.
In Jerusalem.
Yes, in Jerusalem. And I thought, man, I wonder if all these air raid sirens going off, there's more than just a drill going on. I said, I'm not sure about this walking tour. And Sharon says, oh, it should be fine. There's nothing seems to be happening. So we decided to go early and walked out. We walked out of the hotel about 9:30 and we're walking down the street. And I noticed that the streets were absolutely deserted, but it was Sabbath and all the Jewish quarter was all shut down. So we thought, but there's a lot of mixed people there, but there was not a soul on the street. And that got me really, my radar went up. That something's not right. I don't think we should be out here. But let's go on over and see if the tour is going to go. I was getting really apprehensive at that point because I knew something's not right. The air raid siren started again, and we heard this incredible explosion. And I thought, whoa. I mean, it just shook everything. And I looked up and there's rockets in the contrails coming across the sky with little rockets coming up and meeting them directly above us, and they're exploding. It took about 15 seconds for that sound to get back down to the earth. And my instantly thought was that shrapnel is going to be falling out of the sky. It's not rain. It's going to be metal. So I told Sharon, we need to get undercover right now and get back to the hotel as fast as we can. About that time, an ambulance came by, and the guy in a black car behind a couple of guys started yelling, get back inside, get back inside. So I thought, okay, things are going south. So we ran back to the hotel. The big guy that was locking the doors, let us back in and was looking at us like, well, you dummies, you came back. But we had no idea what was going on. There was nobody at the hotel said anything when we went to leave. Don't go outside, it's not safe. No, I didn't honestly feel like it was safe, but we went anyway. And we were able to get back to the hotel. And then there was some shooting going on behind the hotel shortly after that. There was somebody pulled a gun on some soldiers and they ended up shooting this guy. So when I heard the gun battle going on, I told Sharon, I said, things are going sideways here. We need to get back to Tel Aviv, be near the airport, because if things really go bad, we need to be near the airport so we can get out of the country. And I felt like Jerusalem, it could be a hot spot, that if there is something happening, we asked the guys at the desk if they had any information. They had no idea that this other stuff had happened further up the country. He said, no, things will be fine. I said, no. I said, can you get us a cab? We're going to go back to Tel Aviv. And he goes, oh, no, you've paid for 5 days. I can't refund it. He said, so it'll be fine. Just stick around for a day or so. And I was like, absolutely not. We are not spending any more time than we have to. Find me a cab. And it took 4 hours. They finally called and said, hey, we found a guy that'll take you back to Tel Aviv, but it'll cost you double what it costs to get here. It's fine. We'll bring our bags right down. And going back, it was the hour and a half drive going to, it was 45 minutes going back. But the driver had that car floored, and he was halfway hanging out the window watching for rockets. There was no cars on that freeway, like going out here to I-90, and nothing's on it. So it was a bit of a nerve-wracking drive back to get back. The trains had stopped running, the buses stopped running, and it was absolutely deserted.
Wow.
So he got us back. We'd gone to our room and looked up a hotel online on an iPad to find a hotel near the airport. So we got one. We found one that was 7 miles from the airport in Banyap. And it was right on the Mediterranean. It would have been a beautiful place to go just as a nice Mediterranean vacation. White sandy beach.
That's great.
So that's where we ended up. Later, when I looked up at the roof of the hotel, I realized that, and why some things happened. The roof was covered with communication devices. The only hotel within blocks that all the radio antennas and satellite dishes were all in our hotel. Perfect target.
That's an intuitive observation.
I was looking. I thought that's probably not the best place to have been staying.
Yeah.
But you couldn't find a room anywhere.
Wow.
I was really surprised we were able to even get that one.
So you're in Jerusalem. You decide that you do want to go out and try to do some walking around and see what sightseeing you might be able to do and going out and enjoying the town a little bit. But given the circumstances leading up to that point, you felt concerned about maybe doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hindsight 2020, was there any warning signs or anything leading up to when you did go outside that looking back, you might have changed your mind in terms of whether you went out or not?
if anybody would stop this and said, hey, things are going, don't go outside, things are bad. If we'd have known they were shooting rockets, we would not have gone outside. There was no indication that was happening other than the air raid sirens going off. And still, people even in the lobby didn't seem concerned. The only guy that really acted concerned was that great big guy that locked the doors and was standing at the door in front of the hotel. He was watching that door intently. So he couldn't speak any English at all. I tried to talk to him, to say hi, and he just had no clue what I was saying either. So there was no indication at that point that something really bad was happening until we heard the explosion and saw the rockets. That's when I knew, okay, the show has changed.
How long did the barrage of rockets coming in last? And was it pretty well a continuation until you were able to get out of Jerusalem? And aside from getting yourself out of the outdoors, what were some other things that you were doing to provide for your safety and security? Staying
inside. The hotel was built out of really amazingly thick walls and stone. So I felt pretty good that if it took a hit, it would be okay. Because it was actually built right up against the wall. And so just staying tight to the hotel and not going back out. We stepped back out on the porch just to look up because we heard another explosion. Sharon wanted to get a picture of that. And we just stood right there on the porch, and she took a couple of videos of the rockets. But they happened about, probably 3 more times from that time that we saw them. We had more explosions happen, and the sirens actually went off pretty continual for the first hour and a half. And then about noon, they stopped, and then there was nothing else. And I noticed, looking out the window, that a few people were starting to venture outside. They were starting to walk down the street and around the sidewalks a little bit. But I thought, I'm not going back out there.
Was there any other small arms fire or anything like that you heard?
Just the once.
Okay.
Just the once.
All right.
That's when I decided we were going to get back to the area near the airport.
Yeah.
Protect what you can't afford to lose with the Safe Workplace Suite by CPPS, the leading provider of workplace violence solutions. Empower your people, protect your brand, and align with standards. The Safe Workplace Suite includes everything your workplace violence program needs, like assessments, plans and policies, e-learning, instructor training, and behavioral threat support. CPPS is trusted by over half the Fortune 100 and endorsed by ASIS International. So visit safeworkplacesuite.com or check the show notes for more information.
So, having a law enforcement background and many of the experiences I'm sure that you've had throughout your life, for a lot of people experiencing something like that, there's that inherent stress response for everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But having that historic exposure to stressful events, perhaps similar to this, or even probably more extreme, maybe in some cases, but how did that, or did that not impact you in terms of your ability to make decisions throughout that process? Did you have clarity of mind, or did you feel the stress come down and it took you a little bit of time to figure out what in the world do I need to do about this? Talk through that a little bit.
I pretty much made my decision pretty quickly after we heard the gunfire going off. I know that then, okay, this has turned into a shooting match. And I didn't know if it was going to continue on and be more or not. And we kept pretty level-headed the whole time. Sharon, my wife, never got panicky or anything. What was really funny was on our way home, when we were between Amsterdam and Seattle on that flight that we finally had gotten a flight out, and that this had been 4 days since all this had started, she woke up and poked me and said, I just realized we could have been killed. It's just now, it's been 4 days.
Yeah.
And she goes, it seemed surreal, as if we were in a movie. It didn't seem really real. And she never panicked, other than one time when we were in the hotel in Tel Aviv when a rocket did land in the parking lot behind the hotel. Her eyes got as big as a couple plates. And that was the one time that I think she was a little bit afraid. Other than that, she was very calm, which was really good, because then we we could work together very well. And we do that in our travels. We travel very well together. We never have any conflicts when we're traveling. We wait till we get home for that.
That's great.
So, yeah. And so it was really easy for her. She said she decided to let me make the decision on what we were going to do because she felt comfortable with my decisions of, let's get out of here. Let's go back to Tel Aviv. She felt bad that we couldn't stay in Jerusalem and finish out our touring. But once the shooting had happened, she decided, you're right. It's time to go. I didn't think to call Global Rescue at that point.
Okay.
I didn't even think to call them until we got back to Tel Aviv, and we were on our way to the bomb shelter in the hotel in Tel Aviv when we were in the stairwell and a rocket landed behind the hotel, and the dust, we could feel the concussion of the explosion through the cement wall, and the dust came down, and the building shook, and we were still in the stairwell. We weren't even in the bomb shelter yet. And we were in that bomb shelter 4 times that night. But on the second time of the bomb shelter, I said, you know what? It just hit me. I said, I'm going to call Global Rescue. On all of our trips and all the years, I've never had to call them on a trip. So it didn't pop into my mind until we were on our way the second time to the bomb shelter. Then I'm thinking, okay, this is really getting serious. And I said, we need to make sure we can get out of here. I said, let's call Global Rescue and see what they have to say. Just for information purposes, nothing else, to find out what was going on. And then things really got rolling after that.
What was that process like? Was it helpful? Did they provide the information you were hoping for? Was it a comfort? To be able to have information that's detached from the situation, not being right in the middle of.
That's a good question how you asked that, because it really did. It was an amazing comfort. Like I said, it's the best. That was a $1,000 add-on for the whole year because we did multiple trips. It was the best $1,000 I've ever spent in my life. It was unbelievable. I called the number on Global Rescue, and a young lady answered, and she asked me a bunch of questions and checked my membership status and everything. And I thought, oh man, come on. And she said, okay, we're going to have an agent call you back immediately. And I at first thought, what? You're going to call me back? I'm like, oh, great. It was less than 1 minute that the phone rang, and it was a guy on the line. And I found out later that he's an ex-Special Forces guy that is retired and is working for Global Rescue as the call guy that walks you through everything. And he was the same one that we dealt with for the entire time. And the first thing he asked us questions where we were, said, how did you get there? I told him we had been in Jerusalem and we got out. And he goes, oh man, you're way ahead of the game. He says, I've got some other people that are still in Jerusalem that I'm dealing with right now, trying to get them to Tel Aviv. So he said, that was really good that we had done what we did. He said, that's exactly what you should have done. And so I thought, good. And that's just from the self-awareness of, this is going south. We want out of here because I knew Jerusalem could be a hot spot.
Yeah, no, that is great because, I mean, well, just given some of the geopolitical issues historically over Jerusalem, with specifically the United States trying to relocate their embassy there and all of these different things. So having that mindset is very, very astute because you got out much, much quicker than many did.
Absolutely. We were probably some of the first ones out. And had I been really worried about my money at that point, I'm thinking I'm going to lose 5 nights at this hotel, or 4 more nights at this hotel. And it was not cheap. And I thought, no, it's not worth staying. We need to get, because of what we'd read about the geopolitical situation when we left or before we left.
Wow.
So
it's fascinating.
The thing that guy did on Global Rescue, he asked me those questions, but he required us to call him day or night every 4 hours, no matter what. He said, we want to know where you're at, what you're doing, and we want to know you're okay. Every 4 hours, I don't care what time it is, call me. And I did that, and he answered every single time. It never sounded like he was in bed asleep. 2 o'clock in the morning, I called him up thinking, gosh, I hate to call this guy, but he was great. And he walked us through. He said, okay, I know he asked me if I had about self-awareness. And I said, some, I was an officer. I have a little bit of self-awareness of what's going on. And he knew exactly what was happening in Israel at that time. he filled us in totally about the raids that happened in those the small communities. And he said, and as an American, you're going to be an absolute target on the street. He said, stay off the street, which I thought we were going to do anyway.
Yeah.
Which didn't exactly happen like we wanted to. and stay away from windows, watch where you're at. And I thought of that the next morning when we were having a cup of tea outside, and I made a mistake. I set big window this close to it with the table, and there was a great big explosion in the glass, and that window shook this way. And I thought, oh boy, stay away from windows. Let's move to a different table out here with that glass.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating. So one more question while we're up in Jerusalem still. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, when things started happening, what were some of the questions you were asking in terms of trying to figure out what's going on? Was that running through your mind at all? Or did you just kind of have an indication of what was going on, or didn't you care and you knew you'd had to get to safety?
No, I did care about what was going on. And I asked the guy at the front desk about that. I said, these rockets, I said, does that happen? Has that happened before in a while? He says, well, not here. He said, but it should be okay. They'll shoot them for a little while and then stop, and it'll be fine. I said, okay. And then that's before I asked him that before we heard the gunfight. And so once there was some shooting, then I thought, okay, that's good enough for me right now. Mm-hmm. And then I wish I could have spoken to the guy standing by the door, because his nonverbal communication to me when we walked out to go to our walking tour was, okay, pal. You know, he had that look on his face, and I could read it, thinking, oh man, I'm not too sure about this. So I was still hesitant about going, but we thought, well, let's give it a try and see.
Wow. So, fascinating. Well, it's great that you are still able to tell the story, because that is such a sticky situation. And so you get to Tel Aviv. Was there anything different about your ability to depart the country from normal? What kind of additional security measures did they have in place and different things like that maybe were added steps for you to actually fly out safely?
Well, when I started talking to Global Rescue, he said, we need to get you out of the country as soon as possible. We don't want any of our clients still in the country at all. And he said, start looking for flights to get out. And I said, well, I have a flight on Delta on Wednesday. And he said, well, I'd look for something before then. We don't want you there until Wednesday. And this was Saturday night.
So you had 3-4 more days.
That was Saturday night that I was talking to him about that. He said, get on your iPad, start looking. He said, I'll start looking for flights too. He said, because I'm looking for flight for some other people. He called me back, and this was something that's important to think about. I forgot about it. He called me back and said, look, I just found a couple of seats on El Al to Madrid. He said, get on your iPad right now. He said, I'm getting these seats for this guy. He said, get on your iPad and get those seats while I'm getting these other seats. I opened the iPad, I punched up El Al, and everything came back in Hebrew. Location services was our worst enemy at that point, because it thought we're in Jerusalem, Hebrew. I was like, oh my gosh, how do I change this back?
You're not fluent in Hebrew, but Pat?
I am now. I learned how to read this yellow tape to keep off the beach. It's closed, stupid.
That's awesome.
So I got on it and had to turn off, get in, and remember how to do it. And, I'm okay on computers. I can do that stuff. But under a bit of stress, to try and find location services and turn it off so that I can get English back on that iPad was extremely difficult. I really had trouble doing it. So I got it turned off. I got it back to English. I got back on the LL, and the seats were gone. Man, we spent so much time doing it. I got so tired Saturday night, I had to quit. I had to get some sleep. I couldn't even think straight. And we'd been back to the air raid, to the bomb shelter a couple of times all throughout that process. So I just shut everything down. We went fine, and we were able to sleep through the night without having to wake up at 3 because of the air raid. They stopped. I got up in the morning and had breakfast and talked to the guy at the hotel. And he told me, he said, there's nobody else is flying. Everything's shut down. El Al is the only airline that's flying right now, and the Israeli airline. So that's why I concentrated on El Al looking for flights. And I found 2 seats on a flight on Tuesday. And it was $600. And I thought, oh, that's cheap. Boom. And I got them. I couldn't believe that I actually found the 2 seats, just 2 that were available on that flight.
Amazing.
And they were in coach. And I didn't care. I'd take a milk crate in the bathroom.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So we got those. And so I called back to the guy at Global Rescue and said, hey, look, and I'd talked to him that morning already. He said, keep trying. I'm looking also. I found the 2 seats. But what he said was, if you don't find those seats to get out, and this was Sunday morning, if you don't find seats to get out by tomorrow, which would have been Monday, we're going to send a team of 4 guys to get you cross country into Amman, Jordan, to get you out of the country. And he said, and they'll be armed, get you out. So that's what they'll do. If you get kidnapped, you into a war zone, if you're kidnapped, they can find where you're at, or in a war zone like we were, or civil unrest, they will send a tactical team in and get you. So they contract with different groups or people that will do that. And they've got a lot of guys on staff that were tactical operators in the military. I actually, when I retired from the police department, I had been on our tactical team for 8 years. And so I had a lot of knowledge with some of that. And I saw that Global Rescue was hiring ex-special forces guys. And I wonder if I hire an old SWAT guy.
That's great.
So I sent them a letter about that. And they said, nah, we'd prefer, retired military.
Your mustache is a little too long anymore, Pat.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So you successfully find a flight, you work your way out. How did it impact you? Like, when did the reality set in for you? Was it during the event or was it afterwards?
Really, during the event of trying to find that flight out. And then shortly after that, once I got the flight, what they did, by the way, I'm back up for a second. They did send an armed guy to get us, to take us to the airport. And he was well armed, and he was an Israeli guy, but they sent us his picture of him, a picture of his license, a picture of his car, and the license plate. And they told us, check all those things off your list before you walk out of the hotel. Because we want to make sure that's the guy that's going to take you to the airport and not someplace you don't want to go.
Somewhere you don't want to go.
Get kidnapped.
Yeah.
So that was really a comfort to get that information from them. And he said, okay, we're going to let you stay till Tuesday. He said, if that flight doesn't go on Tuesday, don't plan on going back to the hotel. We're taking you to Amman. He'll hook up with some other guys, and you're heading into Jordan.
That process along the way is so helpful because, one, it helps you not have to think about so many different things.
We knew we were going to be able to get out of the country. One way or the other, they were going to get us out.
And having those credentials to be able to rely on, that secondary security, the bona fides to be able to recognize who they are, and having that comfortability really helps make that stressful situation for what it is, much less stressful.
Exactly.
And it gives you confidence. When you have that support infrastructure, you're working your way through the incident yourself to take care of yourself in the midst of it. But then when you have that support around you, it kind of feels like a rain jacket for a storm because it's providing you that confidence of, okay, right, if I just do this next thing, it keeps you focused and you keep working through, do the next thing. And then next thing you know.
I wish I could have coined all that as you just did, because it's absolutely true. It took the pressure off of us immensely to know that we're going to be able to get out, that we're not going to be stuck there for a prolonged period of time. A lot of people were. But Global Rescue was working hard to get their people out. My son-in-law's brother had an employee of his there, and he also had Global Rescue. We found out later that he was talking to the same gentleman I was talking to and got him out.
That's awesome.
So we never ran into him and talked to him until later that they had gotten him out.
There's such a balance with that too, because you've got the individual and you've got the framework supporting the exactly, all the way around. And you have the benefit of relying on so many historical experiences, and you've been around the globe and you've done all of these things, but somebody that is new to traveling around the globe,
Ooh.
and being in this kind of circumstance. That's why we emphasize here with the company is this is why the training aspect is so important. The empowerment of the individual, recognizing what to look for, how to take care of yourself, how to set yourself up before you even begin traveling. What are you looking for before you go? And how do you engage these different resources available so that if something were to happen like this, a lot of times we lose our luggage or we get sick and, we need these different things, but you just never know when you might have a natural disaster, some sort of conflict, and needing to be able to engage these resources when, it's one of the most potentially stressful times of your life.
Yeah, it is. And being lulled into complacency, if that's the right word.
Complacency?
Complacency. After being in the African bush and experiencing that and in absolute unbelievable jungle in the Amazon, and then thinking, oh, we're going on a cruise. I just was like, there were some things I still should have thought about and done because I thought, we'll be on this boat. But being off, different story.
Yeah. So you get back, you're back into at least a friendly territory, you work your way back to the States. What was that process like and how did it impact you? Was there anything that you needed to do to kind of come down from the stress of it all?
Yeah, the flights home, we were able to get to Madrid, and we had been in Madrid just a few months before. I've been hunting there in Spain, and then we were in Madrid for a week, just touring the city. So we knew the city really well. So we actually really were able to decompress because we stayed at got a hotel room in the same hotel that we'd had. The staff remembered us, and it was really neat. It was like coming back to somebody that we knew just in Madrid. And we have some people that we've met in Madrid that we knew. So that's where we really started to decompress there. But Sharon didn't still until on the way halfway to Seattle from Amsterdam is when she was decompressing with that and realized that we could have been killed. And I had thought about that way before that. But when we landed back at SeaTac, it was like, we are back in the United States. And so just getting back on U.S. soil was amazing. And our son, funny, our son met us at the airport. Makes me a little emotional.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, but he's a chaplain for the police and fire departments on the West Side. So he knows, and he teaches classes all over on critical incident management and stress management for officers and firemen. And so he knew one of the officers, he knew them. And so he had the officer meet us at the door in customs when we came out. And he grabbed our bags and carried them. But it was a really cool homecoming to have him there at the door and say, man, he was so upset not knowing what's happening when we were stuck over there. To communicate, we were able to text and stuff, but it was different. They just didn't know what was going on, and they thought, all kinds of bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's always a couple clicks removed from the situation.
So it was pretty cool. We went to go through security. We had to go back through security with our bags to get in, and the officer carried us up to security, badged everybody, and went right to the line. The line was a mile long, and we go through. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
We were really, really glad to be back home and to get actually back into Spokane. It felt like we were,
Yeah, it sounds like it impacted you to get back into the home country.
Oh, yeah, it did. It actually felt good.
Yeah.
But being in Madrid and having been there before really helped to decompress there.
Yeah.
So it was like, wow, we're safe. I didn't feel the one bit uncomfortable in Madrid, walk around even after dark, because we knew the city and knew where to be. So it was good.
Yeah. Well, in Spain, it's so beautiful anyway.
Oh, yeah.
If you had to boil it all down, kind of looking back, what would you say is like the number one thing you took away from it?
Having that backup plan, having a plan A and a plan B. And that's so, so important, And one of the things Sharon learned was that she didn't want me to cancel our flight on Delta. And she said, no, let's keep that in case we can't get out. We can get on Delta. I said, no, Sharon, it's going to be canceled. We need to cancel it and take that fare and apply it to our fare from Madrid back to get home. She said, no, I don't. So that later that evening, she goes, I just prayed. And she goes, it's okay to cancel that. That the Lord is He is our plan A and plan B and get us home. And I said, honey, he already told me that. I've already canceled those tickets.
That's great.
So, but having that extra plan of having the global rescue was the most invaluable thing. I mean, we could have called the embassy, but we would not have got the same absolute hand. It was as if we were speaking to a guy that we knew, that knew us personally, and took it really serious about taking care of us. We could talk to him. If we had a concern, we could call him. And then he called me a couple of times. Hey, how are things going? This kind of stuff. So
I think my last question for you, Pat, is, looking at the scenario, kind of hindsight 2020 again, was there anything throughout the time that you felt helped you get through the situation mentally?
Having our strong faith and having traveled before, if it had been our first ever trip, it would have probably been even extremely harrowing, but then being able to call somebody and have them walk you through everything. But we're good travelers. And so we kept our heads and that's what you have to do. You've got to keep your head and don't get overwhelmed by all the circumstances. Have that plan in place to know what you're going to do and go, as you said, step to step to step and take care of it. There was one thing that did happen when we were in Tel Aviv. There was no food available. And on Monday, a sidewalk cafe opened, and it was a bakery. And I'd gone in there early when it first opened and got some pastries and left. We walked back out, and there was a lot of people sitting there. And we both thought how fun it would be to sit at that bakery and have a cup of coffee, sitting by the street, watch some traffic, and eat some pastries. And first thing that popped in my mind was, that is an incredibly target-rich environment for somebody to ride up on a motorcycle and blow himself up. And I'm still so disappointed we didn't get to go into that bakery and sit and have coffee and pastries.
That's great. Well, Pat, you've been so kind in sharing this time to be able to talk through your experience and the lessons learned and the things that went well. And can't tell you how much we appreciate this, and because these kinds of testimonies like this and walking through these kinds of things really help people to be able to take what you've done and then build it into their own plan,
right?
Or their own mentality of building a plan to begin with. And it's like, well, goodness sakes, I don't want that kind of thing to happen to me. And so,
right,
to the extent that they can be ready themselves, these kinds of things really matter. And just want to really thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
So thank you.
Take care, everybody. And until next time, cheers.